I thought the presentation from Rio Tinto was extremely positive, really useful information there, some real actual examples of what they've been doing, and also the guy from Amec. We have huge carbon footprint from our transport and our business use, and actually some of the things that they're doing, and the 3 strap lines that he used were extremely helpful and something that actually I can use as well.
But more interesting was this idea of outsourcing carbon footprint as well. And again, in the sports services industry, we actually run a lot of other people's businesses, and so we can impact on their carbon footprint. And actually, if you looked at the carbon we influenced rather than our own footprint as a business, it's probably 10 times, 20 times, 100 times bigger. And that's probably the next sector we need to look at, is how do we capture the carbon that we influence as a business rather than just our own footprint, looking at scope 1, scope 2 impacts.
I think what was really interesting was seeing the range of views in terms of the problems with different reporting standards and trying to find consistency in terms of what companies should be reporting to whom and how to get an efficient process in place where you really balance the need for good quality data but also focus on action. Because from what I've seen from our dealings with companies and the public sector is that there's a risk that you get so embroiled in reporting data that the bit that's forgotten is what do you do with it once you've got it.
Well, there's a lot of different things that were discussed, so there are some elements that I thought were very interesting, particularly how some of the other groups were talking about it internally. So the level of sophistication, varies. So it's just interesting for me to see. But particularly, I think the internal comms piece, funny enough, was one that I think will be very important.
What's really important is that our managers can see where the carbon footprint is and the associated costs with that, and actually putting in front of them a piece of paper on actually this is how much this carbon is costing us, actually really drives some behaviour changes and some real improvements in the business. So.
One of the facts that came out of CRC, first reaction people had to CRC is how much is it going to cost me, what's the impact of the legislation in terms of buying the credits going to be, and you go through all that with the finance people. It's very interesting, it's not very much, but they said, well, do you realise how much you could actually save in terms of your bottom line energy bill by introducing these, and it may be 10 times more than you're going to put at risk from the credits. And some of these financial officers are getting really interested, so they suddenly think, oh, this is a big area we can save money in. And so carbon suddenly becomes an area where you can actually save costs, strip costs out of the business, rather than being saying, no, yes, another legislative burden we've got to put in as a cost to the business.
What we've also seen is there are a lot of companies who are looking at the customer angle, where increasingly customers are asking customer-facing organisations like retail companies, consumer goods companies, about the carbon performance of the goods and services that they're buying. And the last driver that we've seen, which has been absolutely huge, has been around cost. Now, it can't have escaped anyone's attention that we're going through a bit of a crisis. And what we're seeing is a lot of questions around how do you align the energy, carbon and cost agenda to drive real change on the ground.
We have about 250 hotels in the United Kingdom right now with this whole issue around carbon reduction commitment coming online. Many of them don't know what that is. So although this group is quite expert, I think, just being able to see that what we can bring back and help educate our own team as to how they need to talk to the rest of the world about this issue is a big one for us. And I do think that in terms of value creation, obviously anything you can do to save energy, when one looks at, for example, the cost of a building or the value of a building over time, that just adds to the value as well. So there is cost savings, but that does translate into higher value of, particularly for us, buildings over time.
So it's all about engaging them, teaching them the ways, and then getting them to report it themselves so they get some ownership of themselves.
We're trying not to approach it like as a compliance exercise. It's an opportunity to actually drive costs out of the business. And if you can take that forward as a message, you can get buy-in right the way up to the highest levels, both within your own organisation, but also within a client organisation, which we're working for, because they want to save costs as well. So it's a win-win situation. That.
Focus on the least amount of the most important information. Secondly, make sure that the right people in the organisation are involved and it doesn't become something that's to the side of the business, it's actually integrated into core business. And thirdly, make sure it's efficient. make sure that you use the right systems that are out there in terms of collecting and reporting data. And the last one is make sure you're using that data in the right way to both publicize what you're doing, but more importantly, driving real performance.
Get the data, become acquainted with it, and get ready to start to report.
Do measure, get everyone involved. The more people that are involved in it, the more engagement you're going to get. Don't start bashing people around the head, basically.